Hi, Thailand Infidelity here. Today we're going to talk about a very interesting headphone, pretty much a first of its kind headphone. This is the AKG N90Q headphone. This is a full-size, sealed, noise-canceling, active headphone. It is not a wireless headphone. And it does not operate when the battery runs out, so it has to be active all the time. It has not only noise canceling features, but it has some features to calibrate to your ear, to provide some equalization, and to deliver a more spatial sound to the audio. We'll get to that in a couple of moments. This is a $1,499 headphone, so it's quite an expensive headphone. It is very nicely built. It has real leather cushions, real leather in the headband, leather covered ear capsule, all aluminum components here. It is rather large for a headphone. It's kind of got the big Princess Leia ears thing going on, and it's, in terms of its styling, it's a little bold and brash, maybe a tad on the gaudy side, but still okay. And I found it surprisingly comfortable. It is a little bit of a weighty headphone. I can't remember the weight. You'll have to look it up in the article on innerfidelity.com, but it's a little bit heavy, but I also found it surprisingly comfortable. The ear pad openings are quite large, should easily accommodate people with large ears. So I do like the comfort of this headphone, even though it's a little bit large. Sometimes it maybe gets a little warmer than normal, but it's not too bad that way. So a fairly good looking headphone, quite comfortable headphone, very well built with nice materials, certainly appropriate for the cost. But in addition to the headphone, you get a lot of accessories. There are two mobile cables. This is the Android 3-button remote cable. There's also an Apple iOS 3-button remote cable, a matching USB cable for charging, and it also takes a digital input, so you can plug it USB into the computer and listen. Although that cable is a little short, it's about 40 inches, and I would prefer maybe a 60-inch cable on the USB, so you had a little bit more room on the desk, maybe even longer than that. And there's also a long cable for use at home, so you have some extra cable length. The cables, the analog cables, go into a 2.5 millimeter jack. There's what the cable end looks like, and it is not mechanically supported in this connection other than the connector itself, which I think is kind of a mistake. There are some headphones that use this 2.5 millimeter tip ring sleeve plug in the headphones, but oftentimes they will bury it deep in the headphones, so the body of the connector goes into the headphone and acts as a strain relief should the headphone get a tug. I did, unfortunately, when I was using the long cable, snag my foot on it, and the headphones dropped off onto the floor. I think it hit the connector when it landed on the floor, and it did break the 2.5 millimeter plug when it hit the floor. Sorry, AKG. However, so this is maybe one of the biggest weak points of the headphone is this analog connection to the headphone. At any rate, the cables are terminated on the player end with a tip ring sleeve 3.5 millimeter plug, which is okay, and it does come with an adapter. It actually comes with a lot of stuff. This is the case for the headphone. It's a very nice, quite heavy. This is a metal skin on the top of the box, and it has a synthetic material on the box and some rubber feet on the bottom. It also has a USB connector on the back, which appears inside the box right here and goes into this battery storage unit. So the headphone will run for about 10 hours before its power runs out, but you also have the option of then plugging into this battery pack for extra time. It did not specify how much time that is in the manuals. The manuals are rather skimpy, and I'm told they'll be producing some better manuals over time. But it's there, and so if you do run out of juice, and the headphones don't run if you run out of juice, you can use this extra battery pack while you're traveling to make it across those long trans-Pacific flights. The headphones really nicely rest inside the case, like that. And the power plug that I showed you underneath that's attached to the storage battery can be connected to headphones, so the headphones are charged when they're put back in the case. Unfortunately, the plug for the headphones, when you insert the audio plug in the headphones and close the case, it does interfere slightly with that connection, so you do have to remove this audio connector when you put it in the case if you're going to close the case. The case also has a compartment here with a lid, and in there is where all the extra cables and the 3.5 millimeter to 1/4 inch plug adapter can live. The headphones also come with this very nice leather satchel for transport if you don't want to carry the big case around, and it is real leather, has a magnetic closure on it, and the headphones fit in there quite comfortably, and it does have a zippered compartment on it on the outside where you can store that extra battery if you're going portably and don't want to carry the big case. All right, so now I told you these headphones have a lot of interesting features on them, or functions on them, and we'll kind of go through them one by one. The first is it is a noise canceling headphone. Very commonly, modern noise canceling headphones will use a digital signal processing circuit in order to implement the noise canceling. And AKG decided that it wanted to deliver as good a sound as possible, and so it kept the noise canceling circuit completely separate from the audio circuit. And the noise canceling circuit is completely analog. There's no digital component to the noise canceling circuit. I did talk to the designer of these headphones, the lead engineer on this project, and so this is I'm confident in this information. So they used very good quality components, and the noise canceling circuit is analog and completely separate from the regular noise canceling circuit, except where the analog signal sums in with the audio. The noise canceling analog signal sums in with the audio prior to the driver. So and the amplifier circuit in here is also, they claim, audiophile quality. After experiencing it, I would say it's a very good noise canceling circuit. Comes within 1 dB broadband isolation of the Bose Quiet Comfort 35, so it does a very, very good job. And I've found that some noise canceling circuits, when you turn them on, can sound a little bit disorienting, almost make you dizzy a little bit, or give you a sense of vertigo sometimes. And I found the noise canceling circuit of this headphone, as best I'm able to tell, is very smooth and not intrusive, or doesn't give you any weird vertigo feeling. So the noise canceling circuit in this headphone works very, very well. The audio for this, even if you put an analog audio in, it goes through an analog to digital converter and convert it into a digital signal internally, 2496 digital signal internally, and then goes through a digital signal processor to affect these functions I'm about to talk to you about, and then gets reconverted by a digital analog converter and then into the amplifier to drive the headphones. These do use a paper or microfiber, but I believe it's a paper cone diaphragm with a rubber surround around it. My experience in the past is these kinds of drivers generally sound better than the plastic film drivers of most headphones. And AKG made a point in there's a research paper that you can find links to in the article on Interfidelity that talks about what they had to do to make this headphone properly responsive. And they did spend a significant amount of time on the analog amplification and the driver and magnetic circuits in there to produce a very coherent signal from the driver itself that doesn't have very much nonlinear distortion. So a lot of effort went into this headphone in order to make a driver that's very well behaved. The functions that are worked on with DSP in this headphone, the things that happen in the digital signal processor in this headphone, is there's an EQ that allows you to change the equalization on the headphone. There is a way to change the spatial character of the headphone that they call the stage control, and then there is a way for it to calibrate better to your ear. And I'll start with the equalization. The ring around the left earpiece is an equalization control, and what it does is it either emphasizes the bass or the treble, or de-emphasizes the bass and the treble. Personally, I found that I would have preferred if this control made an overall tilt to the frequency response as opposed to this bowing effect, because I wanted more bass but I didn't really want more treble. At any rate, it has a degree of functionality, but I didn't find it as useful as I would have a tilt control on the overall equalization. But it does work, and if you look on the Interfidelity site, I've measured the performance of that circuit. The other function that it has is it changes the spatial characteristic of the sound. This little button right here is a multifunction button, and when you give it a push, it will switch modes and it will toggle through 3 different modes: standard, studio, and surround, and then it will go back into standard, studio, and surround. And every time you push the button, it will make this sound, and you can tell pretty easily from this brushing sound whether it's at the ears or slightly up and forward in studio mode, or up and forward and a little more distant in the surround mode. So that swishing sound is the cue that you get of which mode that it's in, and I found it pretty obvious from listening which mode it was in. In the standard mode, it operates like a normal pair of headphones. The left channel goes to the left ear, the right channel goes to the right ear. In the studio mode, they add interaural time differences and interaural amplitude differences. For example, if you have the left speaker on and you're listening to a left speaker in a room, you hear the left speaker in the left ear, of course, but you also hear the left speaker in the right ear after it travels a little more distance and around the side of your head. So that time difference between arrival time difference of the sound from the left speaker to the right ear is called the interaural time delay, and the fact that the right ear is a little bit in the shadow of the head causes the equalization of the sound at this ear to be slightly different than this ear, and that's called the interaural amplitude difference. So in the standard mode, the left channel goes to the left ear, the right channel goes to the right ear. In the studio mode, it adds interaural time differences and amplitude differences. So the left channel goes to the left ear, but part of the signal gets delayed and EQ'd and goes to the right ear, and vice versa for the right channel. Simply put, this is a crossfeed circuit that we've seen for many years in different types of products, and I have a lot of experience with crossfeed circuits. Usually crossfeed circuits will add a little extra warmth to the sound, a little too much extra warmth to the sound due to bass buildup of the mono component of the stereo signal. And what I found in this implementation was that it did a really great job of producing a more coherent sense of space to the sound. It did move up and forward a little bit in my head, but it did not, to my ears, have the kind of tonal changes that I've experienced in crossfeed circuits previously. So is it a darn good, the studio setting is a darn good crossfeed implementation that I liked quite a bit. The surround mode setting adds a room into that equation. So you have the ITD and IAD settings from the studio mode, but then you also add room reverberation and first reflections off wall surfaces in the room to the signal. In this mode, I did hear this room appear in the audio. It sounded like a somewhat damped, medium-sized home theater room. So it wasn't echoey or too reverberant or anything like that. But it definitely had room colorations that I could hear. I found it useful sometimes for movies and things like that, but generally speaking, I thought the coloration was distracting with music. I would say that the coloration is not excessive, however. I think it's enough to give you the impression of a room, which is what it's supposed to do. I would have had it not quite so strong in the mix. I would have had it dialed down just a little bit, but that's just a guess. It very well could be that if you dialed it down just a little bit, you wouldn't get enough impression of a room to change the spatial character of what you're hearing. So I'm not going to make a blanket statement on that. Nonetheless, it was useful in some cases, but not a lot. Whereas the studio mode, where it added the intraaural time difference and the intraaural amplitude difference, I found very useful and preferred it kind of 50-50 with the standard mode that didn't have the crossfeed. So it did quite a good job. I really liked the crossfeed of the studio mode in this headphone. The last digital function it has is that if you hold and press this multifunction button for 5 seconds, it will calibrate to your ears, and it does so by putting a frequency sweep into the headphones, and there's a couple of microphones right in front of the driver here that listen inside the headphones. Now, previously, most of what I've heard about creating a spatial correcting for people's ears is a lot of talk about the differences of the pinna of your ear and how to figure out how to compensate for that and what the frequency response looks like at the eardrum and so on and so forth. And AKG has taken a little bit different approach, and what they've decided is if they try to create around the ear what diffuse field sound would sound like when it's very close to the ear, they would that would be the preferred way to go. It's a little bit complicated to explain, but basically they say if we can correct for the sound around the ear so that it is like sound normally would be when it gets close to the ear, then we can let the individual shape of the pinna of each individual listener's ear do whatever it wants to do to modify the sound before it goes inside. And this seems like a very good approach to me. Basically what they did was they designed a way to compensate for this chamber and whatever ear is in this chamber such that the sound field around that ear is sort of standardized and calibrated to what it would be in the outside world. And the way it does that, as I said, is if you push this button for 5 seconds, it will create a tone sweep which calibrates the ear, and I'll try to give you a sense of what that sounds like here. So the whoop, whoop, little bleepy noise in there. A computer inside the headphones listens to that, takes that input, digitizes it, and analyzes it for evenness of sound field and a character that they're looking for after they've researched what that should be like. And then it does some DSP, creates a DSP filter to correct the sound. Boy, was I skeptical about this. And I can tell you what I would do was I'd take the headphones, I'd put them over my thigh so that there was no ear in there, and I'd have it calibrated to my thigh, and then I'd put it on my head, and of course now it was very far out of calibration. I'd listen for a little bit, and then I'd push the button and calibrate it to my ears, and then continue listening. And what I found was, by golly, it really did a great job of making the sound more smooth and less grainy or piercing or problematic. So it did a great job of actually calibrating my ears. And I did some measurements of this, and you can see it on the Inner-Fidelity website in the review of this product that is linked below the video. But it really did a great job. So I was very surprised and very pleased with the performance of that auto calibration of these headphones. So far so good. The question is, how do they sound in the end? Well, the sound is quite good in its normal setting on the EQ. I'm going to talk mostly about in the mid setting on the EQ. Has a little bass rise, very down low in the bass, a very low frequency bass accentuation hump that is only 3 or 4 dB, so it's not very strong, but it made tremendously powerful, impactive bass response, and the bass response also included all the microdynamics. It was very easy to hear the texture of a tuba and a bowed stand-up bass or whatever low frequency notes were being produced. It did a great job of reproducing the texture of that bass note, which is quite often lost in a lot of headphones. So this did a great job in the bass. The mid-range is nice and neutral, up to about the 2 kilohertz range, and does what it's supposed to do. And then it seemed to me that there were some problems in the treble. After the normal contra peak at 3K, the response drops off between 4 and 6 or 8K, and that is an area a lot of times that headphone engineers will dial back, because that's an area that can be really piercing and annoying sounding if it's there. So I'm not surprised that that area is dialed down, but it also subsequently has a pretty big peak, 3 or 4 dB too large, because I do measure peaks at 10K very often, but it has a fairly large peak at 10K, and then the treble falls off after that peak at what I would consider a normal profile, but it's about 3 dB too high. So I found the upper treble about 3 dB, 3 dB too hot in these headphones. I found that the 10K, 10 kilohertz peak was fairly strong, and it had this reduced 4 to 6K or 4 to 8K area. And what that does to my ears is causes S sounds to sound more. In other words, the low frequency sibilance is reduced, and the higher frequency component of that is a little exaggerated, and it makes things sound kind of breathy or different. I felt the tonality of the cymbals didn't have quite the body that they should have, and had too much of this high frequency stuff. Now I would say that this doesn't rise to a fatal flaw in this headphone, but it is to my ears a flaw, and it was bothersome to me over time. And I did some EQing. You can see the EQ chart on the Inner-Fidelity review, but I did some EQing to bump up that 4 to 6K region a little bit and knock down that 10K region a little bit, only by 2 or 3 dB in each case, and then the overall treble down a couple of dB to try to compensate for it, and I felt it was much more natural sounding with that setting. All told, I think this is a really terrific headphone. I think at $1,500, comparing it, the question is, at $1,500, we'll compare it to another $1,500 headphone. And I felt that it really didn't live up to the kind of performance you can get with a $1,500 headphone. For example, the $1,000 Focalier, or the Mr. Speaker's Ether Flow, or some of these good headphones in that category. But one has to take into account that those headphones require significant expense in amplification and digital front end, and so this contains the digital front end and so on and so forth, and the amplification. So it's sort of not fair to compare it to reference quality headphones. However, if you think of this headphone as a traveler's headphone, as a business traveler's headphone, somebody who's got some means, a person of means, as an upgrade to something like the Bose Quiet Comfort 35. I mean, what do travelers have to listen to that's better than the Bose Quiet Comfort 35, a $350 headphone? And the answer is not much. If you need noise canceling, that's about as good as you can get. Well, I can tell you this headphone is significantly better sounding than the Bose Quiet Comfort 35, and I think is a great traveling headphone. So as a general purpose headphone or a traveling headphone, I would say that this is a real step up, and in the category of enthusiast noise cancelers, I would say this thing rocks the boat. So it does a great job in that regard. I don't think it's going to replace your big rig at home, but it certainly might replace your portable listening rig. It can also run, as I said, it can take a USB input on the headphone, and you can use a USB on-the-go connector from an Android or a Lightning to USB connector on your iPhone and run this headphone digitally, and it does sound a little bit cleaner for not having to go through that initial analog to digital conversion. It accepts digital rates up to 2496. It did have problems syncing with 2488.1 files. I had no problems with 1648 or 1644.1 files, but the 2488.2 files were a little problematic. I couldn't get them to play. So high res to 2496 with the exception of 2488.1. So a very, very interesting headphone. Certainly much better than I expected from a headphone that does so much digital signal processing. Certainly a great alternative for the enthusiast, headphone enthusiast business traveler. Highly recommended in that case. And will go on the Wall of Fame in that regard as the best noise canceller I've heard. Won't go up on the Hall of Fame as a high-end sealed headphone, however, because of the treble problem, sounding a little bit kind of digital and weird. It also, I guess I forgot to mention, the volume control has a volume control on this side, so you can change the volume or change the EQ on the other side. Anyway, I like it very much, the AKG N90Q headphone, and I hope you get a chance to listen to one sometime soon. It's quite an interesting listen. See you guys next time.